I'd like to call on our guest controversialists. That's a word invented by the BBC in London, and a very good one. I beg them to look beyond the nomination and to suggest when this convention is over and the campaign begins, what issues can the Republicans use effectively to win? For example, I'm thinking of the polls today which show that Vietnam is still far and away America's biggest worry. If Mr. Nixon wins the nomination, is he not about as hawkish as President Johnson? Can the Republicans use that issue effectively? Let me introduce the guests. Mr. William Buckley, the editor of the National Review, who ran for mayor of New York and said that if he won, his first official act would be to demand a recount. And Gore, the author who ran as a Democrat for Congress and got more votes in his district than any Democrat has got since 1910, but lost. First, Mr. Vidal.
Well, it's a difficult, I think, any depends pretty much upon who is the candidate. I think it's pretty plain tonight, unless there's some extraordinary surprise out here on the floor, that it's going to be Richard Nixon. And frankly, I'm sort of puzzled by the man. I mean, he's going to do something on the peace issue. I think he has moved his own position from extreme hawk to, I would say, rather moderate. He's made many sort of loose remarks today, talking about we're going to sit down and have a conference. Very unlike the old Nixon. I think one of the things about his character, he once said something very interesting. He said, you know, the best example of a combination of idealists and practical politician was Theodore Roosevelt. When he wanted to get something done, he would compromise all over the place. And I suspect that really is the kind of candidate he will be. He will adjust himself to the issues, and who knows, he might even be, heaven help us, a good president, and I certainly doubt it.
Mr. Buckley?
Well, I think that Mr. Nixon recognizes that the Vietnam situation is in flux. The reason why it is in flux, it seems to me, is suggested by Mr. Nixon's analysis during the past couple of years. Namely this, that the President of the United States has not, as a result of the division within his own party, succeeded in coming out with a truly intelligible explanation of what it is that we're doing there and what it is that we ought to do in order to get out of there. Under the circumstances, I myself predict that the Vietnam issue is not going to be a great issue during the campaign, that it will largely be a period comparable to that during the summer of 1952, the Korean period, during which discernible differences between Mr. Eisenhower and Mr. Stevens weren't really what mobilized the electorate, rather a feeling that one person as distinguished from the other would be able to approach the problem with a fresh perspective and a sense of national energy which the incumbent couldn't dispose of.
What other issues are there? What issue do you think can be used effectively?
Well, I think two primarily. Number one, law and order. I wish there was a way of saying law and order that didn't make critics say, oh, you're talking about the racial question. Now, I would like to know how to say law and order by other means, but still mean law and order. It is a deeply significant issue. And one of the problems that we face, and that Nixon's going to face, is this. What do we do about the growth of really mutinous members of the American community? People who say, look, I don't care what the community says, I don't care what the majority says. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to follow my exquisite conscience and do precisely what I desire to do. Now, these people have got to be faced not only politically, but philosophically. And this is something which, in my judgment, Mr. Nixon has got to elevate into the status of a genuine national debate.
Mr. Vidal, what's your comment on that?
Well, I think this is, of course, an area in which Nixon's own conscience may be indeed exquisite. I don't think he himself is going to be much use. There was an interesting story in the papers tonight. Somebody went into a Southern caucus with a tape recorder, unbeknownst to the caucus and unbeknownst to Nixon. And Nixon said to the Southern caucus, of course, I am against open housing. And I want you to know this. It was a bad decision, I know, but I had to come out for it openly. Otherwise, there would be a fight at the convention. But I want you to understand that. Well, now, open housing, first of all, this is, again, Richard Nixon adjusting to political realities. Perhaps it would be cruel to say, well, he shouldn't do it, or he was a politician. But I don't think that he has any plan at all other than just trying to keep it as cool as possible, because he doesn't come from a party which has, as far as I can think of, any ideas at all, his own plans for ghettos, or I think one computer to tell people where to find jobs. As for the mutiny in the land, which Mr. Buckley refers to, of course there's mutiny in the land. When you have 16 million people in poverty and 16 million people in abject poverty, and these are actual statistics, and when something like only $10 to $11 billion is needed to end it all according to health, education, welfare, I suspect that you're going to need some sort of program. And this year, and this convention has been fascinating, because not only has there been no ideology, or what there is subliminal and done in code, but there have been basically no programs at all. So I must say about Mr. Nixon's campaign, I'm just curious. I don't know what he'll do.
Well, in the first place, assuming that Mr. Vidal can create statistics by simply promulgating them, the answer is that there isn't such a correlation as he suggests. There are 16 million people today below the poverty level. So were there 4 years ago, and so were there 8 years ago, and so were there during all of those years when we've had a beneficent democratic administration. The point of the fact is that most of the people who are leading the way to mutiny are not the poor. They are the William Sloane Hawkins and the Dr. Benjamin Sparks, and it's these people that I think we need to concern ourselves about if we are concerned for the future of the democratic experiment. Now, I have no doubt that an effort is going to be made, as Mr. Vidal just finished making it, to assume that there is a dark anti-Negro prejudice implicit in republicanism. It is an effort that has already been successfully made. Let me give you a very brief example. Last night, Mr. Vidal said only 2% of the people who are here in Miami Beach as delegates are Negroes. This is a considerable affront, considering that they represent 11% of the American population. I did a little probing into the statistics, and I find out that the percentage of Negroes who registered with Mr. Gallup their preference for the Republican Party is 2.4%, so that they are, roughly speaking, adequately represented here. On a one-man, one-vote basis, where the Democratic Party, you have 15% of the people who are registered as Democrats representing the Negro population, and yet they have only a 5% representation. Now, just as I think it's wrong for a Republican to say that the Democrats are, by these tokens, anti-Negro, so I think it's wrong for Democrats to reason oppositely from undernourished statistics.
The statistics are well-nourished, Bill, and the 2% reflects the fact that the Negroes feel there's nothing much to be got for them in the Republican Party, nor is there. Well, and incidentally, while we're on statistics, to finish once and for all, Ronald Reagan, I did some checking last night when you contradicted me that whether Mr. Reagan campaigned for Helen Gahagan Douglas. Indeed, he did. He made several radio speeches. You said that...
indeed, he did not.
Indeed, he did. And also, when he campaigned for Roosevelt, the only issue in that campaign was Republican, was that he'd been a member of the John Birch Society. And the other two, contrary to what you said, were not Democratic candidates. The campaign for the Republican, just to get the record straight.
You have not, you have not illuminated the record on what confounded it.
I have absolutely. Now, you must not react to facts.
I always react to facts.
These are facts, however.
Mr. Reagan's position on the John Birch Society is crystalline. It's always
Yes, it's crystalline.
Always deployed. The sharpest critic of Mr. Reagan in Sacramento is the single member of the John Birch Society.
Yes, I read
Senator Schmidt. Oh, yes, you brought it up. But let's not go into that digression.
Let's simply
ask
Birch Society candidate. Why he knew he was one. And this is a man
Sounds as though Mr. Nixon's going to be maybe the candidate, and Reagan is unlikely.
I know, but I like Ronald Reagan. I like talking about Ronald Reagan. I mean, after all, we'll be nothing but Nixon from now on.
Now, what I was trying to say is very simply this, that it is unfortunately a part of the polemical resources of both parties to try to insinuate that the other party is unfeeling concerning something. My point is that the Republican Party has only had 7% of the Negro vote because the Democrats have succeeded in persuading the overwhelming majority of the Negroes that the Democratic Party shows them an avenue to real progress. But we've had Democratic administrations, not only in the states but federally, and the failure, in fact, to chart a course of true progress may, in fact, for the first time, have the effect of reawakening an interest in the majority of the Negro community to alternative ways of progress. Those are extra political ways, the kind that Mr. Reagan is engaging in California.
Very good, Bill, very good. I just feel a little waffling now. I have a sense out there there's a convention going on. And,
does that mean you don't know what to say?
No, I know what to say. I just finished saying it. Richard Nixon has come out against open housing, and he's explained to the Southern caucus that he said one thing to the public and another thing to...
Lots of people come out against open housing. The Democratic mayor of Milwaukee fought against open housing. It's wrong.
Yes, and my Aunt Juanita's against it too, but we're talking about Richard Nixon, who was running for president.
I know, but you only bring it up because
we're running for president, we're talking about Richard Nixon.
Because you assume that one can draw certain inferences from it.
I'll say you
suggest that Mr. Nixon is delinquent in a morally sensitive area.
I would say that Mr. Nixon has proven himself to be all things to all men, if I may quote St. Paul to you. And he continues to do so. And I am disturbed.
Why did he lose the election? If he proved that, why did he lose the election? If he proved that he was all things to all men. Come on, why?
Because it doesn't always work, and you can't fool all the people all the time, except perhaps on television.
Then he wasn't all things to all men.
I think you're sweating trying to take this.
We have a report that Nixon has denied that he made that statement about open housing. I give it to you for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't make it. I'm sure he didn't make it.
And I'm sure he did make it.
No, I'm sure he didn't make it at all. But I think one has to remember that it is one thing to simply formulate a position which is pleasing to any minority group, whether it's Catholics about prayer in the schools, or Jews about Israel, or Negroes about whatever, and simply to promulgate it, the Fidel Civil Rights Bill of 1968, and then proceed to accuse everybody who voted against it as being anti-Semitic, anti-Negro, anti-Catholic.
I must say,
old labor device, unfortunately not totally successful.
I must say this is one of the strangest countries on earth that nobody's record ever matters at all. I must say I think the public's memory is about 4 weeks at best, and I say this sadly on all issues. I've tried in the course.
I'm afraid I'll have to interrupt you, but I ask you to meditate on the best choice for a vice president tomorrow, because that's what we're going to be talking about.